Hello, and welcome back to today's American Flyer Trains for the introduction to a possible video series that highlights the rebuild of a General Motors American Flyer diesel road switcher that was entered into the AC Gilbert American Flyer line in 1950 with this particular GP-7 switcher. Now, it's not known whether or not this was the earliest diesel made by AC Gilbert, because we know that the also entering into the product line in 1950 was number 360, the Santa Fe Alco AB units. So let's take a look. I've confirmed through photographs provided by the owner, and this is customer owned, and the owner did not send the body or the shell, that it was in fact painted in the facsimile of the General Motors Electromotive Division demonstrator paint scheme, that kind of silver bluish paint scheme that we're used to seeing on these, that had some yellow and blue road names and number markings, and maybe even a yellow emblem near on the cab, yellow and red emblem. So 1950. It is 370, as we said, GM, American Flyer customer owned diesel road switcher, 1950 GP7. Now let's take a look at some of its unusual features. It has an unusual coupling system, and as you can see right here on the front, as it is on the back, a coupler bar. Of course, 1950, only link couplers were available, and the link couplers overrode the bar, and then when pulled, they hooked onto this bar, and I take it would adequately slide up and down the bar to maintain this connectivity. Now notice one unusual thing about this: with the bar and with link couplers, this locomotive, I see no way that it could push cars. It could only pull them. So I haven't tested it, but I suspect that it could not push a car, which we would expect a switcher to be able to do. This piece remained in the AC Gilbert product line until 1953, and it had three variations. I've confirmed through photography provided by the customer that this one is a Type 1, and the distinguishing features of the Type 1 was the coupler bar was inserted into these large tabs you see on either side of the steps. And I'm excited about this train because, as you know, the step configuration like this, which we see some in the American Flyer inventory, these large die-cast or even sheet metal steps, but die-cast in particular, that extend down from the body, are susceptible and risky at being broken off or badly chipped, because of the fact that they simply extend like a dropped tooth on this chassis, and with rough handling or dropping, they can break off. This one has all four. So a Type 1 had the coupler bar inserted into the tab. It also had a non-powered rear truck that was die-cast, and I'll be able to show more details about that later. As you know, most of the time these non-powered trucks on the diesels are sheet metal. The truck is sheet metal. Type 2 was very similar to this one, but the coupler bar remained, but it was now inserted directly into the front of the steps. And then Type 3 actually had a knuckle coupler, and of course this extended into the timeline on the AC Gilbert inventory into 1953. And according to Doyle, he believes that possibly these trains with the bar in 1953 were retrofitted at the factory with knuckle couplers, which of course came into being about 1953. I was also able to confirm through the customer's photography that the build date on this one, there was a build date stamp on the interior of the body or the shell, was September 29th, 1950. I don't know that I've ever seen a build date stamp with a day, but I may be wrong. But this one certainly had the day. So let's take some more looks at it. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. And one of the early distinguishing features you'll notice on this train is that all 8 wheels are in fact pickup wheels, metal pickup wheels, and that none of them have pull more tires. But that's understandable. This is 1950, and I don't know that I have a 46, 47, 48, or 1950 steam locomotive that has pull more tires either. So this was about, probably I'd say, before the time that pull mores were even manufactured. So no pull mores, all 8 pickup wheels. Notice too that as a diesel, we've grown used to the slide contacts or shoe contacts that are affixed to the centered iron side frames. This has none. As we mentioned before, the non-powered truck, this one right here, focus in, is in fact die-cast, the truck part. And notice too that it has a yoke assembly. And you'll see the top of the yoke assembly, well, you'll see half of the yoke assembly there and there. And I believe you'll see a screw right there that's going to allow me to, once the side frames are removed by these screws here and just drop down, then I'll be able to access those screws and disengage this rear truck. Very unusual on a diesel because it's held in with a yoke assembly. I think that the handrails and the fences on this feel that they are a little bit more robust than maybe what we're used to. I've got a GP-7, the Texas and Pacific 374/75, and I've had frustrations with these handrails or fences coming off with just even normal handling. This one, being 1950, you'd think it's susceptible to that, but each one seems to be extremely firm. I can't tell exactly how these are held on. It looks like this little accessory right here, which appears to be some sort of external tank, maybe a fuel tank, is held on by tabs here and here. Not tabs that are integrated with the body and then the piece pushed on, but these are the tabs that are tapped down that you and I are used to pulling out on a lot of these trains. It looks like the front of the train, which might include the fence, is held on with screws. Very unusual on later diesels, especially these GP-7s, that these were held on more robustly with screws rather than being held on with some tabs that were kind of pressed on. We already pointed out that it does not have couplers, but in fact has a coupler bar. Also, all the wiring that we were used to in the early steam locomotives is cloth insulated, including this wiring harness. Now this one seems to be in reasonably good shape. I could not identify any frayed areas on the wiring, even though it's cloth insulated. I could not identify any breaks. I think it can be repurposed and put back into production. I don't intend to disable any of it because it doesn't look like it needs to be disabled. There is one rubber-coated wire, I think, that goes from this light right here. You can see it right there and travels back to the power source. But otherwise, everything else is cloth insulated. And of course, what really grabs your attention about this, including when you actually pick it up for the first time, is this large weight that's forward on the chassis and on top of the front truck. This reminds me, when I picked it up, that it felt more like a die-cast steam locomotive like a Hudson in weight than it did a GP-7. I almost flung it to the roof when I first picked it up because I was expecting it to be much lighter. So I really yanked on it. In a railhead test, the forward and rear bulbs were activated, so that wiring appears to be intact. The reverse unit cycled through all four positions without any problem, although I believe that the drum and the fingers could stand some cleaning and some alignment, and into straightening out one of the fingers, which appears to be a little bent for some reason, maybe from somebody attempting to previously clean the drum. So it was non-operative, but what I identified as possibly being a root cause of the fact that it was non-operative and that the only thing it would do or perform was to go through the four cycle and the reverse units, in addition to what I suspect is just the dirt and grease and grime that accumulates in these worm gears and that area down here which needs to be freed up. I also identified that at least one of these springs was not engaged with the brush holder. It was overlapping in the wrong side of the brush holder. Therefore, the brush holder was kind of swinging freely and was too high up. So without disassembling it, I was able to reposition the spring and put pressure on the brush holder and push the brush holder down, but again, it did not run. I could see the armature attempting to spin. But on closer examination, I noticed that what I believe is the field is loose and is not centered over the armature. It seems to be kind of rattling around. Of course, we know that if the field touches the armature, that is a sure sign that it's not going to run. So I think the focus is going to be the brush and springs alignment and cleaning. In addition to the total disassembly of the motor and its cleaning and refurbishing, it's going to be recentering the field. So this video series will highlight some of this work, and thank you for watching Dave's American Flyer Trains. So long, everyone.